Congress missed a March deadline to reauthorize emergency food stamp funding in Puerto Rico, as many of the island's citizens continue to struggle in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. According to the Washington Post, about 1.3 million Puerto Rican residents are losing access to food stamps because of funding cuts. That's about 43% of the island's population. That same article by the Post also says President Trump is unhappy with the amount of federal aid going to Puerto Rico. He reportedly wants to limit how much money the island can get for disaster relief. Jeff Stein contributed to that article. He's a reporter for the Washington Post. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us. Based on your reporting, how does the president view federal aid to Puerto Rico?
Well, the president has repeatedly told aides that he doesn't want a single additional dollar going to Puerto Rico. He has agreed at the request of Senate Republicans who are trying to pass a broader disaster relief package to support this additional food stamp money, the $600 million to help Puerto Rico survive through its food stamp program. But Trump has said that he's concerned about the amount of money going to the island. He thinks that this money should be going to mainland states, and he's worried that Puerto Rican officials are going to misuse or abuse the funding, despite what a lot of experts say is little evidence that that's gone on.
So that is why he primarily opposes it. Well, House Democrats approved $600 million in food stamp funding in January, but it hasn't gotten through the Senate. Is there any progress on that bill?
That's a great question. We've been hearing all day that negotiations are ongoing, that congressional negotiators continue to talk, but there's a real sticking point here. Democrats have been saying that there are other critical needs for the island that Congress needs to take care of, including federal cost sharing for some infrastructure projects, as well as Medicaid funding for other islands, including the Northern Mariana Islands. Trump has said that he's not going to sign anything for Puerto Rico beyond the $600 million, and Democrats have said that's not enough. It's very likely that this goes to a conference soon where it could be resolved, but every day that it doesn't go on, Puerto Rico could face additional cuts. The island, as you mentioned, has already cut, the island's government has cut food stamp benefits for over 1 million people. Those cuts will go into next month if that continues, and we flew down to the island. I flew down and spoke to a number of residents who are very concerned about that impact, who say that it will lead them to cut spending on vegetables, fruits, other bare necessities and essentials that they need.
And you spoke to several people at an HIV clinic in Puerto Rico. How is the lack of food stamp funding affecting them?
So the way this clinic works, as many clinics on the island and even in the States work, is that basically they get a food stamp allotment for each person who's there. So they've received a 40% cut for each patient, which is a 40% cut to their overall food budget. And that's something that's really difficult for a lot of these clinics that don't have a lot of access to federal funding. This is a particularly poor clinic, and they rely on that federal money to be able to buy things, not just food, but adult diapers was really the example that I think caught a lot of people's attention in our story.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, basically the way the clinic works is that they have nurses on call to prepare, to change the adult diapers of these men, most of whom are confined to their wheelchairs or their beds. The clinic decided last week that because of the in part because of the food stamp cuts, it cannot no longer change those diapers immediately, and that men, after they urinate in them, will have to sit there for hours. It's a really tragic circumstance. The slight good news is that after our story was published yesterday, a number of people from all across the country called the clinic and offered donations, including someone who sent a month's supply of adult diapers. The clinic director was extremely happy, obviously, about that, but of course, not everyone in the national press, the national audience can't learn about every clinic, and this is not a problem that can be solved with donations and charity. Obviously, it's great that happened for that clinic, but the need is far greater than we were able to show in that story.
Yeah, our time is running short, I'm afraid, but I also want to ask you about a new report you have on an investigation by the Inspector General's Office for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. What can you tell us about that?
I'll just say that it's very preliminary, and I don't want anyone to jump to extreme conclusions. That said, we've heard for months now that Trump is seeking to limit the amount of aid that goes to the island. He's directed officials in his administration to see if there are ways to limit that, and so far Puerto Rico has not received nearly as much funding as it would like, and a lot of that funding has been tied up. Much of it has not yet been dispersed or reached people, so the Inspector General for the Housing and Urban Development Department is going to look into whether the money that was appropriated by Congress last year has been at all stymied or held up by undue actions by the Trump administration. Again, I want to be clear, like, we don't know if that's the case, but given what we've heard, it seems at least a possibility, and the Inspector General is going to be looking into that, and hopefully you'll have me back on if you find something interesting.
Absolutely, we will. Jeff Stein, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.